Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm not exactly a morning person, so I usually cut it pretty close with timing. I've got my routine down to a science: wake up at 6:30, shower, grab whatever's quickest for breakfast, and sprint to the bus stop by 7:45. Most days I make it with a minute to spare. That Monday started like any other. I overslept by 10 minutes, which meant I was scrambling. I threw on whatever clothes were clean, grabbed my bag, and ran out the door. When I got to the bus stop, I was breathing hard and sweating despite the cool morning air. The bus pulled up right when I arrived, which felt like a small victory. I flashed my pass and headed toward the back, finding a seat by the window. The first 20 minutes were completely normal. I had my earphones in, scrolling through work emails and mentally preparing for a meeting I had at 9. The bus made its usual stops, people got on and off, and everything seemed fine. Then we hit the intersection near the financial district, and everything stopped. I looked up from my phone and saw we were stuck behind a wall of cars. Construction barriers blocked 2 lanes, and the remaining lane was barely moving. I could see workers in hard hats and bright vests milling around, but nobody seemed to be actually doing anything. The bus just sat there, engine idling. The driver didn't say anything at first. He just sat in his seat, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. After about 5 minutes, people started getting restless. I heard someone up front ask what was going on, but the driver just shrugged and told everyone in a flat, emotionless voice that we were stuck in traffic. That was it. No explanation, no estimate of how long we'd be there, nothing. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. I checked my watch. It was already past 8. If we stayed stuck here much longer, I'd definitely miss my meeting. I tried to stay calm and went back to my phone, thinking maybe I could at least get some work done while we waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The bus hadn't moved an inch. People were starting to mutter to each other, and the woman near the front was on her phone practically shouting at whoever was on the other end about how late she was going to be. A guy in a business suit kept checking his watch and tapping his foot against the floor so hard I could feel the vibration from where I was sitting. I turned to the man next to me, an older guy with a briefcase on his lap. I told him this was pretty bad and that you'd think the driver would try to find another route or something. The man agreed with me, saying you'd think so, but the driver was just sitting there like he had nowhere to be. We both looked toward the front of the bus. The driver was on his phone now, scrolling through something, completely unconcerned with the growing tension behind him. Another 10 minutes crawled by. The businessman in the suite finally snapped. He stood up and walked to the front, his face red. He demanded that the driver do something about the traffic because everyone was going to be late. The driver barely looked at him and told the businessman in a dismissive tone that he couldn't control traffic and that we'd move when we moved. The businessman said that wasn't good enough and that the driver could take a different route or at least communicate with everyone about what was happening. The driver responded coldly that he didn't have to explain himself and told the businessman to sit down and wait like everyone else. The businessman's jaw dropped. I could see several other passengers starting to stand up now, adding their voices to the complaint. The whole bus was watching. The businessman said this was unacceptable and that he wanted to speak to the driver's supervisor. The driver told him to go ahead and call whoever he wanted, saying he was doing his job. The businessman shot back that the driver's job was to get everyone where they needed to go and that he was just sitting there. The driver replied that his job was to drive the route and that he couldn't drive when there was traffic, adding that it wasn't his problem. The argument kept escalating. The businessman was shouting now, and the driver was getting defensive and hostile. Other passengers were chiming in, demanding the driver do something, anything. The whole situation was spiraling. Then the businessman did something I didn't expect. He reached over and hit the emergency door release. The doors hissed open with a loud sound that made everyone jump. The businessman announced loudly that everyone should get off because the driver wasn't going to help them, so they'd help themselves. For a second, nobody moved. Then the woman who'd been shouting on her phone stood up and headed for the door. Then another person. Then another. It was like a dam breaking. People just started filing off the bus, fed up with sitting there and getting nowhere. I sat there for a moment, weighing my options. I was already incredibly late. Staying on this bus clearly wasn't getting me anywhere. I grabbed my bag and joined the stream of people exiting. Once I was on the sidewalk, I turned back to look. The bus was almost completely empty now. Maybe 3 or 4 people were still on it, looking uncertain. The driver had jumped up from his seat and was yelling at everyone that they couldn't just leave the bus like this and demanding they get back on, saying it was against the rules. Nobody listened. People were already pulling out their phones, calling for rides, or checking maps for alternate routes. Some were just standing there, looking frustrated like I felt. Then I heard sirens. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers got out and immediately went to the bus driver, who was still standing by the open doors. One officer asked what was going on. The driver explained frantically that the passengers had just abandoned the bus and that they'd opened the emergency doors and left without permission. The officer looked around at the crowd of people on the sidewalk, then back at the driver, and asked why they had left. The driver said it was because they were impatient and that they were stuck in traffic, and the passengers couldn't handle waiting. One of the passengers, a woman in scrubs who looked like she worked at a hospital, stepped forward. She corrected the driver and explained that wasn't what happened. She said they'd been stuck for over 30 minutes and that the driver had refused to communicate with them or try to find an alternate route. She added that he'd been rude and dismissive when they asked for help. Other passengers started speaking up, backing up her story. The businessman who'd opened the doors explained what happened from his perspective. More and more people added their voices, and it became clear that the driver's version of events wasn't matching what everyone else was saying. The officer asked if anyone had recorded what happened. A young guy near the back of the crowd held up his phone and said he got most of it on video. He walked over and showed the officer his phone. I couldn't see the screen from where I was, but I watched the officer's expression change when he watched. His jaw tightened and he nodded slowly. He called over his partner and they both watched the video together. The second officer shook his head and walked over to the bus driver. He told the driver that based on what they'd seen and heard, he was under arrest for endangering passenger safety and failing to cooperate with his duties when working for the transit company. The driver protested in shock, asking what they meant by arrest and saying they couldn't be serious. The officer explained that the driver had abandoned his responsibility to the passengers and created a dangerous situation, then told him to turn around. They handcuffed him right there. The driver was sputtering, trying to argue, but the officers weren't having it. They read him his rights and led him to one of the police cars. The rest of us just stood there, watching in disbelief. One of the officers stayed behind to take statements from anyone who wanted to give one. I waited my turn and told them exactly what I'd witnessed. After about 20 minutes, another bus arrived to pick us up. The new driver was apologetic and friendly, completely different from the first one. He took an alternate route and got us moving right away. I finally made it to work almost 2 hours late. My boss wasn't thrilled, but when I explained what happened, especially the part about the driver getting arrested, she was more understanding than I expected. Several other people from my office had been on the same bus, so my story was backed up pretty quickly. The bus driver ended up suspended pending an investigation, and eventually he was fired. I still take the bus to work. I still run a little late most mornings, but I've never had another ride quite like that one. I work 3 jobs. Retail, food service, and a small gig doing inventory counts for local businesses. It means I'm always tired, always busy, and I see way too many faces to remember anyone unless they really stand out. Some people stand out for all the wrong reasons. About 6 months before this whole mess happened again, I had an incident at my local Walmart. I was shopping on my day off wearing my blue lanyard from one of my jobs, just minding my own business in the clothing section. This woman on a motorized scooter came barreling around the corner and ran straight over my foot. Not a little bump either. She drove right over it, then sat there for a few seconds before backing up. The pain was immediate and intense. When I yelled out, she didn't apologize. Instead, she started screaming at me for being in her way, saying I should have moved faster, that people like me were always blocking the aisles. I was too shocked and in too much pain to really respond. Other customers and employees came over and she just kept yelling. Security got involved, reviewed the cameras, and saw she'd actually swerved toward me on purpose. She was banned from that Walmart and a few others in the area. My foot was a mess. Bruising everywhere, swelling, pain that lasted for weeks. I had to take time off work, which I really couldn't afford, and every step reminded me of that horrible woman and her shrill voice. Eventually, it healed, though I still got twinges of pain now and then. Fast forward to early 2020, right when the virus was starting to make headlines, but before everything shut down. I was back at Walmart just picking up some craft supplies and random stuff I didn't really need but wanted anyway. Retail therapy, you know? I was wearing jeans, a sweatshirt, and that same blue lanyard I always forget to take off. I saw this woman staring at me near the entrance. I waved, being friendly like I usually am, and she just scoffed and looked away. She seemed familiar, but I couldn't place her. Like I said, I see too many faces. I shrugged it off and kept shopping, but then I kept seeing her. Auto center, office supplies, dairy section, baking aisle, even the toy section, which was weird because she didn't have any kids with her. Just another woman, younger, with dark hair and a bob cut, dark makeup, wearing a t-shirt and jeans with heels. Both of them had these intense expressions, like they were on a mission. I'm pretty unobservant normally, but even I started to notice something was off. They were following me. Every aisle I went down, there they were a few seconds later. My stomach started to twist. What did they want? I was in the craft aisle, looking for matte fabric paint for a project I was working on, when I heard it. That voice. That awful, shrill, nightmare-inducing voice that I'd heard in my head every time my foot hurt for months after the incident. The older woman grabbed a random paintable sign off the shelf and loudly exclaimed to her companion about how perfect it looked. Her voice was so loud that several other shoppers turned to look. The younger woman agreed enthusiastically with her mother, then turned to me and asked if I didn't think it was wonderful. My brain froze. It was her, the woman who ran over my foot, the woman who was supposed to be banned. What was she doing here? I realized the younger woman was her daughter. They'd probably changed her appearance enough that she could slip past security, came in with someone else as cover. I nodded quickly, grabbed the slick fabric paint instead of what I actually needed, and tried to leave. But they kept following. My heart was pounding now. This wasn't normal shopping behavior. They were hunting me. I grabbed a pair of jeans off a rack and practically ran to the changing rooms. The area was quiet, just one associate standing there who let me in. I went into a room and locked the door, sitting on the bench and trying to catch my breath. Maybe they'd lose interest. Maybe they'd leave. The associate wandered off, probably to help someone else or just because no one was around. I sat there waiting, listening for the sound of that motorized scooter. Then someone started pounding on the door. The banging was so violent and sudden that I screamed. The door shook so hard I thought it would come off. Actually, it practically did. The younger woman screamed at me to get out, yelling that they knew who I was and that I owed her mother for what I did. She kept pounding and the hinges were ripping out of the wall. I scrambled into the corner when the door fell inward. I threw my hands up to catch it and push it away before it hit my head. She looked at the destroyed door frame, at the hinges torn completely out of the wall, and just shrugged. Then she climbed over the fallen door and got right in my face. She told me I was coming with her and that I owed her mother compensation for getting her banned from the store. I shrank into the corner and told her no, that I wouldn't go anywhere, and that she should leave me alone. I added that her mother shouldn't even be here if she was banned. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe it made things worse. But I've never been good at saying the right thing when I'm scared. She grabbed my hair, actually grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me out of the changing room, dragging me toward her mother, who was sitting on that scooter looking smug. Then she pushed down on my head and let go, throwing me to the ground. She demanded that I apologize, screaming the word now at the top of her lungs. I was shaking, sitting on the floor, and both of them started screaming. That I owed them, that I ruined everything, that I needed to pay for what I did. The associate who'd been at the changing rooms came back with another worker. They heard the screaming and the crash. They separated us, and the associate helped me up off the floor. That's when the older woman actually stood up from her scooter. She'd been sitting there the whole time like she needed it, but she stood right up and lunged at me. I put my hand out instinctively and pushed her back. She started screaming that I assaulted her, claiming that everyone saw it happen. One of the associates told her to be quiet and wait for the police. The police came. There were cameras near the changing rooms because of theft concerns, and they caught everything. The door being destroyed, me being dragged out by my hair, the older woman getting up from her scooter and lunging at me. There were witnesses too, including a poor woman in the changing room next to mine who thought someone was coming for her next. The corner of the fallen door had actually cracked through the wall into her room. I pressed charges, both of them. Assault, destruction of property, trespassing, the whole list. I was shaking when I gave my statement, but I did it. They were arrested right there in the store. The older woman kept screaming about how unfair it was, how I was the real criminal, how her daughter was just defending her. The daughter stayed quiet, but her face was twisted with rage. I left the store without my craft supplies. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to go home. They both faced serious charges and were permanently banned from every Walmart in the region. The daughter got additional charges for the assault and property damage. I spent most of my childhood helping out at my family's small farm, feeding chickens, tending to goats, and learning everything there was to know about caring for livestock. When I turned 18, my parents started bringing our animals to local agricultural festivals, setting up petting zoo booths where kids could interact with farm animals. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had taken on more responsibility in the family business. We had partnered with a local research center that studied agricultural practices and animal husbandry. Part of our arrangement involved showcasing their newly hatched chicks at festivals. These weren't just any chicks though. They were part of ongoing research, which meant we had to be extremely careful with them. Every 15 minutes, we had to swap out the batch of chicks on display with fresh ones from the research center's lab, making sure the previous group got back under their heat lamps. Baby chicks are fragile. Without proper heat, they can die within minutes. This festival was one we did every year. It was held right next to the research center, which made the chick exchanges convenient. The festival attracted hundreds of families, and our petting zoo was always one of the most popular attractions. Everything was running smoothly that day until I had to make one of my routine chick exchanges. I was carrying the box of chicks with both hands, being careful not to jostle them too much. The lab door was closed, which wasn't unusual. I couldn't open it myself since my hands were full, so I spotted a woman standing nearby and politely asked for help. I excused myself and asked if she could open the door for me. She looked at me like I had just asked her to donate a kidney and demanded to know why she should help me. I was confused and asked her to repeat herself. She said she wouldn't let me in because I didn't work at the lab. I explained that I had baby chicks in the box that needed to get under a heat lamp immediately. She didn't believe me and started yelling for security. People were starting to turn and stare. A security guard approached, looking confused about what the commotion was about. The woman told him I was some strange man trying to break into the lab. I was wearing a black shirt with the word staff printed in huge white letters across the front and back, so I had no idea why she thought I looked suspicious. The security guard asked me why I needed to get into the lab. I explained about the baby chicks and the heat lamp. He looked at my staff shirt, then at the box, then back at the woman with a bewildered expression. He said I seemed legitimate and reached for the door handle. Before he could open it fully, the woman lunged forward and told him not to let me in. She actually pushed the security guard out of the way and tried to yank the box out of my hands. I held on tight, terrified she was going to hurt the chicks. The security guard told her to stop and explained that there were living things that would die if she didn't let me through. He told me to carry on with my day. I thanked him and rushed into the lab, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I carefully placed the chicks under the heat lamp and grabbed a fresh batch that needed to go out to the petting zoo. The whole encounter had rattled me. Who acts like that over someone trying to do their job? When I got back to our booth, I told my family what had happened. My mother shook her head. My father laughed and said, There's always one crazy person at every festival, and my younger brother joked that I should start wearing a name tag that said not a criminal. Later that afternoon, I had just finished eating a quick snack and was heading back to our area when I heard shouting. A crowd had formed around one of the craft booths, and I recognized that voice immediately. My stomach dropped. The entitled woman was demanding to speak to the manager and claiming everything was outrageous. I approached cautiously, curious despite myself about what she was upset about now. The vendor apologized and asked what the problem was with her purchase. The woman complained that the necklace she bought was cheap and probably made of plastic. She demanded an immediate refund. I could see the necklace she was holding. It was clearly costume jewelry, the kind that costs maybe $5. The vendor looked exhausted. The vendor apologized again and said they could process a refund. They asked if she had the receipt. The woman said of course she had the receipt, but that wasn't the point. She went on about how she shouldn't have to deal with such terrible products at the festival and how unacceptable it all was. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward. I excused myself and said I overheard the conversation. I mentioned that the vendor seemed willing to give her a refund and suggested maybe it was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved peacefully. She whipped around to face me, and recognition flashed across her face. She pointed at me and said she remembered me. She claimed I was the one who tried to sneak into the lab earlier with fake chicks. I corrected her and said that was also a misunderstanding. I explained I worked at the petting zoo, and those were real baby chicks that needed proper care. I suggested we focus on getting her refund so she could enjoy the rest of the festival. The vendor agreed and said they wanted to resolve the issue. They handed her the refund. The woman snatched the money from the vendor's hand like it personally offended her. She told the vendor they better improve the quality of their products next time and complained that the festival was going downhill. Then she stormed off. The vendor and I exchanged tired looks. They thanked me for helping. I said it was no problem and that people can be difficult sometimes, but most folks were just there to have a good time. I said I'd keep an eye out for more trouble. That evening, my family had another good laugh about my encounters with the entitled woman. The next day, we were back at our petting zoo, bright and early. The animals were happy, the weather was perfect, and families were already lining up to visit. Everything was going great until I spotted her walking toward us. My brother saw my face and followed my gaze. He said, "Oh no, not her again." I confirmed it was her and told everyone to brace themselves. The woman approached and said she couldn't believe we were still allowed to operate after what happened yesterday. I told her we were just there to provide a fun experience for families and children. I asked if she had any concerns we could address. She said she had concerns all right. She claimed she heard we were letting people pet filthy animals without proper sanitation. I assured her we took hygiene very seriously. I explained we had hand sanitizers available and regularly cleaned and sanitized all the petting areas. She said she didn't believe a word of it and accused us of spreading diseases everywhere. My mother stepped forward, her patience clearly wearing thin. She explained that we worked closely with local health authorities to ensure the petting zoo was safe. She said we took every precaution to maintain a clean and healthy environment. The woman said she wasn't convinced and demanded to speak to our manager. I explained that we didn't have a manager on site since we were a family-run operation. I said I was there to address any concerns she had and asked if there was something specific she wanted to discuss. She demanded a full refund for her ticket. She said she wasn't letting her children near our germ-infested place. I blinked. This woman had children with her at the festival, and instead of spending time with them, she was harassing vendors and festival workers. I said I understood her concern, but we couldn't issue refunds based on her perception of our petting zoo. I explained we did our best to provide a safe and enjoyable experience for all visitors. She said it was unacceptable. She demanded a refund again and threatened to report us to the authorities. I told her if that's what she felt she needed to do, she was welcome to. I mentioned that we had many satisfied visitors who appreciated what we offered. She huffed and stormed away again. The families who had been waiting to enter our petting zoo looked uncomfortable. My father apologized to them and said sometimes people have bad days. He invited them in to meet our friendly animals. The rest of the day passed without incident. We were packing up our things when the entitled woman returned, and this time she had a festival organizer with her. The festival organizer asked if we were the owners of the petting zoo. I confirmed we were and asked if there was a problem. He explained that the woman had made several complaints about our operation and was insisting on a full refund for her ticket. He said she claimed our petting zoo was unsanitary and dangerous. The woman stood behind him with a smug expression on her face. I told him we had already explained to her that we took hygiene seriously and couldn't issue a refund based on her unfounded complaints. I mentioned we had many satisfied visitors that day and believed our petting zoo provided a safe and enjoyable experience. The organizer said he understood, but they had to take all complaints seriously. He said they might have to investigate the matter further. I told him if that's what he needed to do, he should go ahead. I said we had nothing to hide and would cooperate fully with any investigation. The woman's smile grew wider. She thought she had won. Over the next few days, we provided the festival organizers and health authorities with everything they needed. Our sanitation logs, our partnership agreement with the research center, testimonials from regular visitors, health inspection certificates, everything. It was exhausting and frustrating, but we knew we had done nothing wrong. Finally, the investigation concluded. The festival organizers called us with the results. They apologized for the inconvenience and said that after a thorough investigation, they found no validity to the complaints. They confirmed our petting zoo met and exceeded all safety and sanitation standards. They said they were sorry we had to go through all that. The relief was overwhelming. But we weren't done yet. My father suggested we file a formal complaint about the woman's behavior, not just toward us, but toward other vendors and staff. We documented every interaction, and other vendors came forward with their own stories about her harassment. The festival organizers took it seriously. After their own investigation into her pattern of behavior, they banned her from returning to any future festivals. We also decided to press charges for harassment. The legal process was slow, but we were determined to follow through. She had caused so much unnecessary trouble for so many people, and we wanted to make sure there were repercussions. A few weeks later, we received word that our harassment complaint was moving forward. The woman would have to appear in court to answer for her behavior. Multiple vendors and festival staff had come forward with similar stories, painting a clear picture of someone who went out of their way to cause problems wherever she went. The court date arrived and we presented all our evidence. The judge listened carefully to testimony from us and the security guard, the craft vendor, and several other people she had harassed at the festival. Her own behavior in court didn't help her case either. She tried to argue that she was just standing up for consumer rights and safety standards. In the end, she was ordered to pay fines for harassment and was issued a restraining order that prevented her from coming within a certain distance of our business or contacting us in any way. It wasn't a huge victory, but it was something. My family and I continued running our petting zoo at festivals for years after that. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.